I know y'all ready to talk some more positions. How about wide receiver? Can we find wide receiver two? Or do we already have him? Talk to you about it right now on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Jacksonville? It is your team every day. We thank you for making us your first listen here on Locked On Jaguars. Glad to be here with you today. We've got some good stuff to talk about, but make sure you find us where you're supposed to, wherever you get podcasts, whether you watch them or listen to them. Locked On Jaguars will be there each and every day to bring you the absolute best coverage we can get. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Shout out to the everydayers for joining us here every single day on the podcast. We appreciate you. We'll talk about wide receivers. Remember that song back in the day? I can't remember who made it. I think it was O'Brien. A guy named O'Brien hit me with the wide receiver. All right. So the Jaguars have a great one in Brian Thomas Jr., but we're about to get greedy and get him some help. Financial matters is what we'll talk about in the third segment when you try to figure out where you're going to get that help from. Free agency and the draft, we'll go over guys in both of those areas so you can have a better idea of how you're going to make your decision. And the wide receiver room check, that's where we're going to start right now. Look, I don't know how they feel about the incumbent players that they have. I know they love Brian Thomas Jr. I know Brian Thomas Jr. was on the unofficial Bill Belichick All-Pro second team. That's right. Brian Thomas Jr. is a superstar. I think he's a top 10 receiver right now in the National Football League. I think he does everything across the board. He eats up the route tree. He's a gamer. A lot of people missed on that. They did not realize that he could do more than just run, go routes, and slants, right? Because that's primarily what they say the tape showed them when he was at LSU. And I pounded on the table and told anybody who would listen to me that man was way better than Adonai Mitchell or A.D. Mitchell. I told folks that he should have been in that top 10, and nobody wanted to listen to me. And now here we are talking about Brian Thomas Jr. as the top 10 wide receiver in the National Football League. Very good player. Even the guy you can give him the ball in the backfield and he has his pace. He knows when to burst. He knows when to change speeds. He can catch with his hands. He catches in traffic. He just has the it factor. The most talented wide receiver we have seen here since Justin Blackmon. There you go. And he ain't taking a backseat to him either. That's just my opinion. I am a huge Brian Thomas Jr. fan. You got one of them ones, Jacksonville, and you need to be happy. Thank you, Trent Baalke, for getting us one of them ones, because that was a position Trent had never even drafted well, but he did it this time. Thank you. I really appreciate it. So I know that these folks love him. I know that there's a connection to Christian Kirk. I don't think that connection is strong enough to pay him $24 million a year this year. So I think they're probably going to rework it and make Christian the slot. You don't want to try to redo your whole wide receiver core in 1 year. Maybe they still like Parker Washington just as much as the last coaching staff did. The key is Gabe Davis. They paid Gabe Davis a lot of money, and Gabe Davis cannot be cut or traded without it really impacting the Jaguar salary cap. I think they're going to see what they got with Gabe Davis this year. That's why I don't think they're going to sign one in free agency, because it goes back to allocation of funds. We'll get to the financial matters later, but the fact that he's on the team. I do want to say this, though, to Jaguar fans. I'm cleaning up my mess here as I'm sitting here doing the podcast. I do want to say this to Jaguar fans. Look around the league at the really, really good teams. Name their third or fourth receiver. It's hard. It's hard when you think about it, man, because the fact that having 5 guys, they're going to have 5 or 6 on the team, right? You don't want to know those people's names too much, because if you have that many, that means you don't have 2. Now, go look at the really, really good teams in this league that have really, really good passing offenses, and you'll notice they got a number 1 and a 1A or a 1B or a clear number 2. And those are the guys like the team that won the championship, even though Jahan Dotson had a big catch down the sideline. Other than that, the Philadelphia Eagles we're a 2 wide receiver team for the most part. Then you can throw the tight end in there too. And the reason why you can put the tight end is because he catches a lot of balls. But the other part of the tight end that I really, really want to harp on is that he's not a move tight end. He is just a complete football player in Dallas Goedert. And y'all know how I feel about move tight ends versus non-move tight ends, right? I just think that position needs to be a dude that is versatile and can do two things, not just a team that just has a guy that does this and then you have another guy that does that, right? So that tells you right there that, me and Evan Ingram probably ain't gonna ever see eye to eye on that situation. But that's not personal with Evan. Evan's a good football player. But for me, for trying to disguise what you're trying to do, making sure you have people on the field that can do everything. To me, if you're going to have a dude like Evan Ingram, you just need to put a third wide receiver on the field. That's just my opinion. But everybody doesn't agree with me, and I understand that. But the thing is we have become enamored with knowing who the fourth and fifth receivers are. Look, if your team is good, man, I'm telling you, if you get the 4 receivers, it's only because of injury. That's it. It's only because of injury. And that's not something you want to even be thinking about. So while the roster has to have those guys on them, I understand that, obviously. Us thinking that we, like the third and fourth guy, that's why I said last year, do you remember when I think I did a podcast? I know I did a podcast, but I talked about Miami. And why did they come out of the second half and the first 2 people to touch the ball? Why was it Tank Bigsby and Parker Washington? That's just a team that just doesn't understand what it is, man. That was a group of coaches that had certain things that they wanted to run, and the guys that they wanted to run them with, and that's a mistake. That's why I'm glad it's over for the plays over players type thing. I love players, right? And I do think in Liam Cohen's offense, though, you will get a featured third wide receiver like Palmer was. I think his name is Trey Palmer down in Tampa. He caught some balls, right? And eventually, McMillan, the rookie out of Washington, sort of took over. And I think he's going to be the wide receiver too down in Tampa because Chris Godwin got hurt. He got hurt on Monday night and he missed the rest of the season. It's not a catastrophic injury, but he's going to be one of those players that we're going to mention as a possible free agent. And the reason why I think we have to mention it is obvious because of the connectivity with Liam Cohen, the fact that he has made a career out of being a number 2. He's not a selfish guy. He's a 1A kind of number 2, 1A or like a 1B type player. He can be your number 1, but he's always been a really, really good number 2 because anybody that they get is going to have to know that Brian Thomas Jr. is going to get the first look. And he's probably going to get the second one too, right? So is it Gabe Davis or do we move into the draft and free agency? I don't have the answer to that question, by the way. It also depends on what the new GM wants. I ain't gonna bury that in the ground. There's five candidates, the 5 finalists, Ian Cunningham and of course James Gladstone. Those are the 2 that everybody's talking about. Rumors out there that pretty much is a done deal. Ethan Waugh's name is in it. I don't think it's a done deal yet. But yeah, it depends. It depends what they all sit down and decide to do. Are they married to old contracts? All of that stuff. We'll talk about it more here in just a second on Locked On Jaguars. All right, today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you missed the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay. That's right. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting, whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch 3. I never feel like I'm missing any action. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $100, $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your one shot at winning $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, rolling along here on Locked On Jaguars. So we're going to look at some receivers in the free agency and the draft, right? If the Jaguars just say the hell with it, we ain't worried about no big contracts. It's whatever. We're just going to do whatever we want to do. Obviously, the man that everybody will talk about. I did mention Chris Godwin, but it would be T. Higgins. T. Higgins is probably going to get tagged by the Bengals or re-signed by the Bengals. But if he doesn't, he's going to automatically, he's probably going to get tagged and traded if they don't keep him. So trading for T. Higgins would be out, in my opinion. I'm not sending a first-round pick to anybody for anybody, especially when it's a luxury. I'm not even sending a second-round pick to anybody right now. And then you got to pay a guy. But T. Higgins would be number one. A guy I expect to be free is Chris Godwin out of Tampa. We just talked about him. Very, very, very dependable. Banged up, you got to wonder at 28, 29 years old, have the injuries finally caught up to him? And I think he broke his fibula or something like that. No ligament and ACLs and all of that stuff. So with him, it's just a matter of what the price is and whether or not Gabe Davis's money precludes you from doing anything in that area. But it would be very, very nice for a veteran wide receiver who's used to sharing reps and sharing balls to come in here and make this team a 2 wide receiver team, other than the times when they do go and put a guy in the slot when they go into 3 wide. So I'm assuming that Christian Kirk's going to be that slot receiver, which is where he did okay outside, but he's probably better suited as a slot. They brought in Gabe Davis last year, who has a pretty significant salary cap number this year. So he's going to be here whether you like it or not. But some other guys you could look at, Amari Cooper. I don't think this is the good destination for him. I just don't. I'd rather the Jaguars either go young, big, or fast, right? Or some combination of all 3 of them. Godwin gives you that speed, not necessarily the speed. He is pretty fast, but he gives you that size, and he gives you the connectivity with Liam Cohen. Other guys out on the market would be Stephon Diggs. That's a no-go for me for a lot of reasons. DeAndre Hopkins, I think, is going to retire. I think he's announced that. And besides, he doesn't fit he fits the big part, but he's slow. These days, there's no separation. Hollywood Brown, I have no interest in that if I'm the Jaguars. Now we get to this guy, Darius Slayton. I got one complaint about Darius Slayton, and that is he's a body catcher. And I'm not talking about a homicide detective. Like, you caught a body, okay, I got to go to the scene. He's a body catcher. He catches the ball with his body more than with his hands. And I noticed it a lot on film. He has 700 receiving yards on 15 yards per reception over the first 5 years in the league. He's had 4 years where he's got 700 yards. He said, well, hey, all right, Wig, so that shows you he's all right. Maybe he's a third receiver. Then I tell you, he played on the New York Giants with Daniel Jones and a bad offensive line, and then you'll go, okay, well, maybe if you put him in a different situation, he's a little bit better. And I think he is a really, really good football player. 6'1", 195. The only complaint, like I said, is the catching with the body. Coaches tend to not mess with guys that have been doing something for a long, long time like that. Like Michael Irvin went to the Hall of Fame, and he was a body catcher, right? And they tend to say, okay, well, as long as he's effective, it ain't the way I would teach it. But since he's been doing it that way for so long, the only time that gets in the way is when something is a matter of just milliseconds, like a defensive back. That ball has to go a little bit further. And in a game of milliseconds, sometimes that could cause a problem. Like, instead of you getting it here and then having to pull the contact, you're letting the ball get all the way to you. So it's taking just a little bit longer. And sometimes you wonder if that's enough for a guy to get his hand on the ball or to be able to separate you with physicality, separate the ball from the wide receivers. But I really, really like him. I just don't know what the price would be, right? What would the price be for Darius Slayton? And would it be something that the Jaguars would be willing to do? Because he's fast. He's fast. Now, I don't think the Jaguars need speed per se for their team. I'm looking at speed is always good, right? But I'll sacrifice a little bit of that for some size, right? Or just a pure football player, a route running fool, like a guy that can just route run himself. You look at Minnesota. with their two guys. Of course, Justin Jefferson, but that Addison kid is pretty damn good for Minnesota, and he is quick. He runs good routes. They even got a third receiver up there. I think his name is Naylor, number 83. He's pretty good too, but they're mainly a 2 wide receiver team. But Puka Nacua, I don't know how fast he is, but he is a route runner, right? He is just like Cooper Kupp was in his prime, and that's the type of dude too. I got one in mind too, and I'll tell you who it is in just a second. But that's the kind of guy too that I would love for them to do. Now, in terms of the financial side of it, segment 3 is coming because there are some ramifications when it comes to how much money you're willing to spend. But in free agency, it's going to be whether or not you choose what is already proven. Darius Slayton's a real good football player, and some of it comes with a little bit of projection. Keenan Allen's a little too old for me. I probably wouldn't do it, but if the Jaguars really, really did need a pure route runner to play opposite of like if they didn't have Gabe Davis, I wouldn't mind him going after Keenan Allen, even though he's a little bit older. But in this system, he'd be like having that sure tight end. I see Deontay Johnson's name down here, and I want to go right past it because I don't want no parts of that either, right? But yeah, those are the main guys that you look for in free agency that you're willing to go out and give some money and pay. Not a whole lot. There's a difference between them and the guys in the draft. And like I said, we'll talk about that in segment 3. The key is to getting people that can play, right? So when you look in the draft, I know the Jaguars picked 5th. And there's talk that what if Travis Hunter falls to 5? Would you do it? Yeah, I'd do it, but I do it as a corner, and I give him a little package. But whatever package he wants, whenever he's on offense, Brian Thomas Jr. is still the number 1. That's just my opinion. I would take him, but I would take him and let him play corner. I think he gives you that kind of advantage at that corner spot where he is a real good athlete. Like he's the guy that you want to guard Brian Thomas Jr. if Brian Thomas Jr. played for another team. So he would be the dude you put on Jamar Chase. He would be the dude you put on Malik Neighbors. And, I don't know with their defense if they switch sides or if they play a shell, but we'll have to see what Campanile does. I have to probably do a little bit more research and ask my man Peter Bukowski, does he allow corners to follow? But that's what I would do. So when you look at all of the receivers, and I put by the way, when I do this online and you see me with the 2 eyes or whatever, it's not a cosign. I have a job to do. And people saying, man, wishful thinking, don't be taking a wide receiver at number 5 or whatever. But part of this is you have to go through each and every scenario, and this is the gig. So I did put a video of Tet McMillan. I think his name is Tetaroa, but we call him Tet McMillan, 6'5", 212. If they love him, I don't see why not. You will be putting yourself in a little bit of a pickle, though. And that pickle is using a top 5 pick on a wide receiver, and in 3 or 4 years, you're going to be where the Bengals are. And I know people are saying that's 3 or 4 years. Dude, we'll be playing in a new stadium by then. But you'll be in a situation where you're going to have to make a choice. And obviously, the choice will be Brian Thomas Jr. without knowing anything else. But you'd still have to make a choice because I don't think a team can play 2 guys $100 million to play wide receiver. If they do, it's going to screw the rest of the team up. Like Cincinnati's got some hard decisions to make. I like Luther Burden III. Also, 5'11", 208, a little bit more compact built, kind of built like Jamar Chase, a little bit smaller. Chase is about 6'1", but he is built like that. Malik Neighbors, he's that type of player. Tough, faster than you think, athletic. He's like one of the dudes, man, that when you grew up, you just picked him. I don't care if you were playing kickball or basketball, you picked him on your team. Emeka Egbuka, Egbuka falls into that same category as Burden. He can play inside, he can play the slot, he can play outside at 6'1", 205. I was told was the best natural athlete on that team until Jeremiah Smith showed up. That's what I was told, and that included Marvin Harrison Jr. But that he was the absolute. By the way, if we could, I'd give that 5th pickup right now. We could get Jeremiah Smith in 2 years. Yeah, I would. Matthew Golden, I'm a little bit in and out on. I don't really know exactly what he's going to be. It depends on how he runs. Kid out of Texas. He caught everything in sight last year. I'm going to say this name because I think this dude has number 2 wide receiver all over him, and I think you can get him in the 2nd round. It's Alec Eyomanor. I believe that's his name. You saw him have a real good game against Travis Hunter. That's right. That's when Stanford upset Colorado 2 years ago. He had a big game. He had like 200 yards receiving that game. Now, here's my favorite one is Jack Beck. I like Jack Beck because obviously the Beck family has been through a lot. Jack's brother died in New Orleans when the terrorists got loose in that city. And, that's brought him a lot of attention. I'm sure he probably wishes there wasn't a reason for that attention to be brought to him. But he went to the Senior Bowl and he played well and was voted the best receiver by his teammates. He's 6'2", 215. And when I tell you a route runner, a middle of the field, seam killer, catches everything, runs tough after the catch, he is exactly what a complimentary receiver would be for a guy like Brian Thomas Jr. So, yeah, he's my favorite. Like, he's my favorite because getting with the Gabe Davis contract and me always preaching about allocation of funds to positions, what you do instead of going out in free agency, if you can get this type of player, this isn't a type of player I think it's not for next year. And not saying he won't contribute next year, but this is a forever player. This is a dude you want on your team for 10 years. That's the kind of player I think Jack Beck is. And Beck is spelled with an H, B-E-C-H. If you go look him up and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. A big physical kid, man, from TCU. And I know they say you should watch out for TCU receivers, but I really, really like him. Xavier Restrepo is a good player. He's a pure slot guy. If you're going to take him, that's because it's a future position. After Christian Kirk is gone, maybe in a year or so. Another one I like from TCU, I'm double dipping to TCU, is Savion Williams. He's big, man. And Savion I know if they pick Savion, people are going to start acting like he's the kid that they took out of Colorado State a few years ago, LaVisca, because he's big, man. He's 6'5", 225, big, muscular, fast, athletic, but he's like a utility player. He's like a Swiss Army knife. They Debo Samuel'd him a little bit at TCU. And so there will be a little bit of that. Well, we've seen that already. No, he's bigger and faster than LaVisca Chenault. He just got dreads, so don't get that twisted. Jaden Higgins is another one at 6'4", 215, and Jalen Royals is another at 6 feet, 205. I like both of those guys too. Maybe by the top of the third round, you'll see guys like that. Trey Harris is another one that's intriguing at 6'3", 210, but man, it's almost like you're getting a diet version of Brian Thomas Jr. They're almost too similar. And the thing that I know about quarterbacks and wide receivers in particular, I've heard so many coaches say how they like their room to just have a different look to it, like a basketball team, like you got different players. I'm going to tell you why financial matters matter in just a second when we're talking about wide receivers. We'll do it in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. All right, third and final segment here on Locked On Jaguars, where it's your team every day, talking about wide receivers, where you can get them. All right, so let's get to the financial part of it. Because of Gabe Davis's money, and Gabe is going to be a part of this team, the best case scenario, I think, for the Jaguars is to get a guy in the second or third round. You're not paying him a whole bunch of money. He can contribute right away. He can help right away. And you wouldn't feel bad about him unseating Gabe Davis, because that would mean, one, he's a good player. And then two, if you got to pay a dude that may not be worth the money at the very least, then you can get a dude that's playing that same position that, he doesn't cost you a lot. That's why the Jaguars, when they got Dante Fowler 1 year and then they got Yannick Ngakoue, who was just as good, but Fowler was sort of a dude that was, whether he was injured, coming back from an injury, or a little bit of an underachiever, it made it okay because Yannick was there, and you were getting real good value for him because he was a third round pick, but he was playing lights out like a guy who was picked in the first round. So it was a lot. It balanced it out. When you look back at the corners, when you had A.J. Bouye and Jalen Ramsey playing at a high level, Jalen was on a rookie deal. Bouye was a big-time free agent. So the way you want to do it is you can either, when you have either a receiver that's on a rookie deal, that's when you go into free agency. But if you've already gone into free agency and you've gotten some lukewarm results, but you still got to pay the guy, the only way you can get the production that you want is to go back into the draft and get another younger dude. So I'm thinking second, third round. And if you find somebody in the fourth round, and I want to clarify, because y'all know I hate that term, you can find, right? What I'm talking about is not lucking up, not just walking down the street and boom, a wide receiver hits you upside of the head. I mean, through your evaluation, through knowing where guys will get picked, what position you can move up and down and slide around. Where when I say you can find, what I'm talking about is where you can anticipate a whole bunch of guys that sort of have the same skill set, and you can envision all of them being Jaguars. Okay, if they're all within like pick 50 to 80. So you can kind of maneuver yourself to get into that area to ensure that you get one of the guys that you like. That's what I mean by you can find, not that it's going to be by accident. It'll still be based on evaluations. Spare no expense, though, man, when it comes to getting weapons for this team and this offense. Somebody told me, they said, man, if they go into the year with BTJ, with the other two guys you mentioned, with Kirk and I forgot who told me. They said Kirk and Davis. They said if they go into the season and those are their three guys, the Jaguars are going to be in trouble. So that's why I think they're going to obviously go out and try to get another player. This is not a farewell of Parker Washington, or this is not, well, Gabe ain't going to fix it and they're not going to use him correctly, because a lot of this stuff can be put on the coaching staff. If Gabe Davis turns into the Gabe Davis who played in Buffalo all over again, then we ain't got to worry about too much. But I still would suggest that they go out and get a young guy to help this team in the future. Like I said, I don't look at the draft as build your team for next season thing. I look at the draft as you're drafting a dude that you hope is the 10-year player here for Jacksonville. Jack Beck is my man. That's right. So if the Jaguars stick to the plan, man, they'll take Jack Beck in the second round, and we'll be good to go with that. Make sure y'all tap in to Locked On NFL twice a day. Tyler Rowland in the morning, and then me in the afternoon in the barbershop, giving you the NFL with the use of local experts that know your teams like no one else. Make sure you check out Locked On NFL each and every day. Okay, I've done edge rushers. I've done wide receivers. And we'll get to some offensive linemen tomorrow. I know y'all want to talk those trenches. We'll do that and more on Locked On NFL. Y'all take care. We'll see you next time.